Thank you for the many comments and questions under our tourist visa interview video. So I want to answer some of those questions, especially the questions that were, though in different words, asked by more than one person, or questions that I think would be of interest or helpful to more people. Hi, I'm SohYoon Atac. I'm an attorney and one of the founders of Simvisa. We release videos about US law, immigration, and other related topics. If this is of interest to you and you want to know more about how the law can better serve you, please subscribe. Usually, I spend a lot of time preparing and outlining for a video because I want to make sure that I cover, whatever specific topic I'm covering. With US immigration, there can be a lot of weird details, and sometimes I want to make sure that I hit some of those. But this is refreshing because today I'm just going to go down and answer the questions. I guess that's my lawyerly disclaimer. So enough of that. Let's dive right in. Someone commented that having limited English makes it hard to do the tourist visa interview. And I absolutely agree. That would not be a good situation to be in. And along those lines, other people also asked in the comments, what language is the tourist visa interview conducted in? Well, so most consulates have the interview in English, of course, as well as the most commonly used local language. Some consulates have multiple languages, so the most commonly used local languages represented, and they can conduct the interview in those. But if that's not the case and your language is not there and your English you don't feel is proficient enough, then definitely, you don't want to just go in and take your chances. You want to be prepared. So different consulates have different procedures for this. So definitely check and, be prepared. Some consulates will say 2 days before, you must provide the name of your interpreter so that they're ready to receive them and check them in through security and all that. Different consulates have different procedures for this. But definitely don't leave it up to chance and do the interview where you can't communicate properly. For sure, be prepared and don't feel like you have to do it in English. Not at all. Just because I want to visit, Paris, do I have to speak French? It would probably go better, but yes, even if I don't speak French, I can travel to that country. Another commenter mentioned that she has a terminally ill aunt. So first of all, I'm really sorry to hear about that. And if that would be, with regards to the tourist visa interview, if that would be a good purpose. Now, first of all, if that is your purpose, that is your purpose. And so, of course, that's what you should say. But I do want to point you to, I think I talked about in that previous video where you commented, that this is kind of akin to the example I gave, I think, about going to help, a friend's or a family member's newborn baby. And so you're going to go and be helpful. Go back and watch that if you don't recall. But basically the idea is, I know it sounds crazy and this is such a legitimate purpose for a trip, but if it sounds like you're going to go and do the work or services that would have been done by a US worker, so like someone who might have been hired to clean the house or provide nursing care or things like that, that can actually be looked at in a negative light. So, like I mentioned, you can go back and, it's very analogous to that new baby, example that I give. So just make sure you clarify that the point is to go and be with, your terminally ill aunt or a sick family member and to spend time with them and of course be helpful. But your primary purpose isn't to go and, perform those services or do the work that someone else would have done. So can someone go to the United States for 21 days at a time, about 4 times a year? And now, of course, that depends on your specific situation, but there's nothing prohibiting someone from doing that. However, I will point you to another video we did that talks about how to best use your tourist visa and to increase your chances of being admitted each time that you're entering as a tourist. So, for example, if you were here for 21 days, left for just a really short time, like a week, came back for another 21 days, left, and then 2 days later, try to come back again, I think that might start to look kind of, not as favorable for the customs officer. So go ahead and, the video we'll put below and you can see what kind of makes sense so that you can more easily show your non-immigrant intent and that you're not actually using the tourist visa to start living in the country. Someone asked about the letter of invitation in the context of the tourist visa interview and what it exactly does. Well, that depends on the situation. So typically, they can help the applicant kind of lessen the burden they have to show their financial ability to support the entire trip. So for example, if you're going to visit a friend and the friend says, oh, I'm going to provide food and lodging, during the week that, you're visiting, then you don't have to show as much money, for hotel and food that you would normally have to do. So that can be helpful. But like I mentioned, we've used, and I've seen different people use that invitation letter to accomplish different things. Oftentimes it can also provide the context for the purpose or actually talk about the purpose of your visit. It could be, oh, I'm inviting, my cousin to visit me and attend my wedding or whatever it might be. So I think that can be a really helpful tool. And like I mentioned, I think in a separate video, I will probably make a longer video about that because you don't want it to be too helpful almost, if that makes any sense. And I think I mentioned this before too. For example, if the letter says, I love my cousin and she can stay with me as long as she wants for, she always has a place here, that might not be so good because you do want to establish the fact that this is a temporary trip and that you'll be leaving after the purpose of your visit ends. So someone asked, is it mandatory to have both a business purpose and a pleasure purpose when you're talking about why you want the visa at the visa interview? And other people have asked, why are we issued a B1/B2 visa when I just want to be a tourist, or vice versa? And so my answer is no, definitely not required to have both purposes. It's just that the visa is issued as B1/B2, and it's upon entry when the customs officer can stamp you in for, if your purpose is for business at that particular trip or if it's as a tourist for that particular trip. And because the visa is often issued for multiple years, it can be for 5 years, 10 years, and for multiple entries, it makes sense to have this flexibility that you can be a temporary visitor for pleasure or for business, and your purpose might be different, during particular trips within that, for example, 10-year period. And for those of you who might get a 10-year multiple entry tourist visa, aren't you glad that you can do one visa interview and hopefully get that visa versus having to get a visa and go in front of the consulate every single time? So this is a good thing that they issue it with that flexibility built in. To the question of what family members do you have in the US, someone asked about the definition of family. What does the officer mean by that? Well, it's not actually clear, right? And different officers can have different things in mind. So generally speaking, you should definitely mention any close family members you have. So if you're going to visit your child, your son or daughter, or, brother or sister or whatever, definitely, of course, mention that. And as far as other family members, you could mention broadly that you have other relatives that are more distant, and you don't have to give any details. But if the officer asks, then you could say, yes, I have an aunt or whomever. And sometimes you might have family that you may know or have heard that they live in the US, but you actually don't know them or have any relations with them. And that's totally fine too. So again, you don't need to give too much detail, but if the officer asks, then you can go ahead and explain. Someone asked about a sponsorship visa and that my sibling will sponsor all my expenses in the US. Now, the word sponsor, I think this person meant, like we talked about in the invitation letter context, that if I go to the US, my sister will provide, food and lodging or, help me and cover my expenses while I'm in the United States. But if you say sponsorship visa, that actually sounds like something different. Because remember, in immigration, we have a bunch of terms of art that don't mean the same thing that they typically mean in regular conversation. So please refer to, what I said about the invitation letter. And, I wouldn't go around like telling the officer, this is a sponsorship visa, because it almost sounds like, will the person sponsor you for a green card or, it actually kind of is more confusing. So maybe avoid using that term. Is it necessary to show plane tickets? No, definitely not. Because a lot of consulates actually state on their website, please don't buy any plane tickets unless you have your visa in hand. So no, definitely not a requirement. At the same time, I think sometimes people buy plane tickets for a specific event and they already have it, or sometimes people have reservations that can help show the purpose of their visit and their intentions, but definitely not required to have bought plane tickets. There were some questions about what if I am, for example, from India, but I work and live long-term in Malta, or variations thereof, where somebody works and lives and are a resident of a country that they're not a citizen of. And the question was, how can I show that I'm going to return to my country of citizenship? So there's no requirement that you have to prove that you're going to return only to the country of your citizenship. What the consular officer is really interested in is, of course, the fact that you're not an intending immigrant, that you will leave once your travel is done. So the same requirement of showing that non-immigrant intent applies. And, if you have a stable residence and job to which you intend to return in a country that is not the one of your citizenship, then that's fine. And there, again, is no requirement that you can only go back to the country of your citizenship. Not surprisingly, there were questions about the fact that the wait time to get a tourist visa interview is so long, and how can that be sped up? Well, this is the bane of my existence and the bane of so many people's existence who have to deal with US immigration right now. Before the pandemic, tourist visa interviews could be had fairly quickly, like 10 days in a lot of places. Of course, once the pandemic happened, consular services pretty much shut down. And thank goodness, things have improved dramatically and we've had a phased resumption of consular services. But the fact is, most consulates are still really backed up. And when we're talking about those precious visa interview slots, the tourist visa interview is like a very bottom, of that totem pole, or the least priority compared to other visa categories. So it's going to be challenging, I think, for still a while to come. So having said that, yes, you have to understand kind of the state of the world as far as, US consular, wait times. But I think it may be, depending on your specific situation, worth exploring options and speaking with an immigration attorney about that. For example, we've seen some success, actually not with a tourist visa though, but for certain other categories, for example, with third country national processing. So where a person applies for a visa interview that's not the consulate that's of the country that they're a citizen of or where they reside. And that definitely happens sometimes under certain rules. And since the pandemic, I think even consulates that were doing some of that do it a lot less because just about everyone's backed up. But even since the pandemic, there have been some success with things like that. Or maybe with the attorney, you could explore, maybe you could be eligible for a different visa category and see if there are some creative options potentially available. So I don't want to give false hope, but there's not a easy solution for this. And I do recommend that you speak with an attorney. And like another thing I'll mention is, for example, maybe you have a situation that merits an expedite request. And so again, speak with an attorney. And let me address, there were a number of questions that had some specific facts and asked, what are my chances of getting a tourist visa? Or what are the chances under this fact? Well, for most of those, I think my answer was yes. For example, there was one that said, is it possible to grant a tourist visa to someone who's married to a US military person living abroad together? I think this might have been the Philippines or wherever. And my answer, like I said, is yes. In fact, I know people in that situation with a tourist visa, but I don't know how much value that my answer or anyone's answer really would give with those limited facts, because as you can see, there's an individual visa interview for each tourist visa. And the reason is that it's very discretionary and it's very fact specific. So really, you want to make sure that you meet the legal requirements, that you have non-immigrant intent, that you are able to financially support your trip. And beyond that, then you want to be able to convey your specific facts and answer the officer's questions and to show that you're credible. that, you would not be someone who would violate the terms and conditions of your visa. So along those lines, I think there's also some confusion. Someone asked about, unless I misunderstood, why can Bolivians only stay for 30 days in the US? I think they're actually talking about how US citizens are granted 30 days to visit Bolivia. And I've actually seen this happen a lot where, thanks to the amazing power of, the internets and Google searches and all that you get answers to your questions, but sometimes they may actually be very confusing and not exactly what you're asking. And I don't expect people to know all this because I am an immigration attorney and it's still confusing. And along those lines, there's, someone asked, can a 74-year-old grandparent, or basically someone who's elderly, be able to get a tourist visa? Well, again, the answer is yes. I know people who've gotten tourist visas for the first time in their 70s. But again, it depends on the specific situation. Now, one question that I can answer definitively is someone asked, can I work with a B1/B2, visa and entering the US with that? And the answer is definitely no, you cannot. It is not a work authorized status. If I do freelance work, what do I put down as for the employment? Generally, you put down self-employed, because I assume that if you're saying that you freelance, that means you're not what in the US would be akin to a W-2 employee, but that, you do contract work. So probably that's factually accurate to put that you're self-employed. So more than one person asked about showing that their dog or dogs is a strong tie to their home country, and if that would work. So given the fact that even leaving minor children behind is not foolproof for US immigration, and I think I talk about that in a different video because a lot of people are shocked by that. Many people, unfortunately, have been in the situation where they're forced to go work somewhere else and send money back and not have the luxury to even be with their kids. So the fact is that that's not foolproof. So given that context, leaving back your, beloved pet or your dog, is also definitely not foolproof. And I think a lot of immigration attorneys may disagree with me on this one, but if truly your dog is a very strong tie for you, and I wouldn't maybe lead with it, but I don't think it necessarily hurts, and if that's really the case, then you might want to try, because maybe it'll help to, show your authentic and credible self and convey that to the officer. And again, you can bring documentation about, the arrangements for your dog or whatever. And there's no reason an officer has to look at any documents that anyone brings, but it probably helps to have that just in case. So again, take what I say with a grain of salt, because I don't know if other immigration attorneys would agree with me on the dog or pet, situation. There's a question about, what if there's no invitation letter, no one's inviting me to visit them in the US, and I'm just going alone? What would I say the purpose is? Well, first of all, there's no requirement that you have to know somebody in the US. Maybe I just want to visit Iceland, even though I don't know anyone there, because I want to see the awesome, landscape and meet the people or whatever. So, so first of all, don't think that's a problem. And I think you should say whatever your true purpose is. If it's the fact that you want to visit, I don't know, Chicago and see the birth of the skyscraper place and then the architecture, whatever it is, or you want to go and, see Yellowstone or visit the national parks, whatever is authentically and, true for you, that is what I would try to convey, not in a long-winded way, but in a concise fashion. Actually tell the officer your touristic purpose. So thank you again to everyone who commented and asked these and other similar questions under our tourist visa interview video. As I've said before, we'll do more videos on the tourist visa topic, but I hope that answering and addressing these specific questions that were asked provides some additional insight into that tourist visa, B2 visa process. If you found this helpful, please like the video, and for more like it, please subscribe. Also, please feel free to comment below regarding any topics that you'd like us to cover, as we're definitely looking at those as we consider future videos. And maybe I can do more videos like this, where I answer and address the questions that are asked in the comments. As always, I wish you a great trip to the United States, and have a great rest of your day.